Bitcoin was designed to give a peer-to-peer electronic cash system to the world as an alternative to the fractional banking system most countries use today. It's a form of electronic digital cash, a type of currency. It's made secure with cryptography and is known as cryptocurrency. It's decentralized. Now this means no one person, company, government or country has any power or control over the Bitcoin network. It is, however, controlled by the miners, which I will explain later. It's incredibly safe, utilising cryptography, proof of work.
Yeah, and the problem is that the miners do control it.
And a distributed peer-to-peer network, each of which I will cover in this video. Bitcoins are kept safe within personal digital wallets, and these wallets are only accessible by the person holding the private key. Bitcoin cannot be deleted, frozen or sanctioned. The only way to stop it would be to turn off the internet.
That's not exactly true. If enough miners were not mining, then you could just basically hack what's left. Like if there was only a handful of miners, you could hack the system and turn it off.
So now,
I mean, granted, you would have some things. Nowadays, there are so many on your phones and whatnot, but for the most part, yeah, if the biggest bulk was the mining, you could do whatever you want if you hacked enough of the mining. At this moment, there's too many miners, and they're too just random. But that's the biggest flaw. The second Bitcoin isn't mined enough, then your whole security system's gone.
now we have an idea of what Bitcoin.
And the argument would be to keep the security system, as of right now, the way in which they're doing it is wasting extreme levels of energy. And if any country or whatever starts putting weird known taxes for trying to use X amount of electricity, if they find out, like, if these miners were ever, like, if they ever tried to do a thing in which they tried to, like, reduce mining by putting a thing that if you get caught mining, you got to pay extra for your electricity or something, like a basically cryptocurrency tax on electricity, in which if you lied about it, you'd be fined. Yeah, that would kind of change mining overnight, which I'm going to assume at some point, now that it's argued that mining is becoming this detrimental of wasting electricity, they're going to try to tax people, which will reduce mining, which will reduce technically the safety of the network.
Bitcoin actually is, let's look at where it has come from. It all started with Satoshi Nakamoto. It could be picked up from mispronouncing the name, however no one actually knows who this person is, if it is indeed a person, as it could be a collection of people.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, if there was a person who wanted to create a currency in which all you would have to do is send people mining equipment, and then they could just create as much of this money as possible, and it wouldn't ever be traced. I mean, there seems like there would be certain types of collection of individuals who would like a thing in which would be not traceable. And it's not even like criminals. No, some could be criminals, but others would be... I'm just talking about the ability to just send mining equipment and then be able to just create money out of thin air that could be never traced to any place. There's a lot of things that are typically... like any government sometimes what likes to fund weird clandestine stuff, like kind of like James Bondish-ish type things. I mean, kind of like, like Q from James Bond might have like invented cryptocurrency type of thing. But anyway, like Bitcoin or whatever. But anyway.
And this is where the mystery lies. Nobody to this day knows for sure who it is that created Bitcoin, only that he, she or they went by the title of Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshi created the blockchain technology, which Bitcoin...
Yeah, there's not any hint of like, it might have been started by like MI6 or something similar to MI6 or whatever, but okay.
The first ever digital currency operates on, which they also created. The supply of Bitcoin is limited to 21 million.
Yeah, so at some point, it will not be that profitable to have the mining equipment. And it's great if you're under the illusion that that's not a problem, because you know what? You'll still get transaction fees. Really? So, if all the mining equipment is no longer used to mine it, at what point is all of your equipment so old? And explain to me, if I had like a computer from the early days of the internet, a 1980s computer, how hard would it be to hack that versus a modern one? I mean, what's the limitations there of a computer that old? So, it's great that Bitcoin is this, but their network is going to be aged out. And if you're no longer paying people to mine it, you're no longer paying for them to basically reinvest in making the whole system harder to break. So at some point, and it might be decades from now, I don't know. It could just be at any moment, though, if Bitcoin became the least popular thing to mine and everyone switched to other mining. This is kind of the other issue that no one talks about with the problem with Bitcoin mining is what happens when you turn it on to a different Bitcoin? Oh wait, you've just lost half of its security there.
Now this is good, as you will never have to worry about inflation decreasing the value of Bitcoins. Also, as the demand for Bitcoins increases, it will drive the price up in the future. The smallest denomination of Bitcoin is known as a Satoshi, after its creator, and is 100 millionth of one Bitcoin. The current value...
Okay, meanwhile, you still need people to want to trade it. So it's great that you can break it down, but if you actually learn about the history of capitalism or the history of currencies, the problem with a lot of currencies is, you know what, when we used to base it off gold, if people weren't reusing gold, if they weren't exchanging, if you had one person obtaining all the gold and then becoming a miser, you ended up stopping trade. So that was one of the biggest problems within feudalism is you didn't have an endless supply of coins. I mean, that could also be some of the issues you see later on with Rome collapsing. Okay? When they stopped going out, conquering places and getting gold just flooding in from newly conquered places, it meant that hoarding of those started happening. And so then you start reducing the ability to trade. When enough people, this was the biggest argument against mercantilism, was the fact that the whole point of that pre-capitalist economy was to go out there and try to collect what was the most valuable thing, gold, silver, whatever, and just hoard it within your country. So sure, you might have the initial thing of people trying to create trade, but at one point, it's like the game of Monopoly. You can keep trying to play it, but there becomes a point when the bank runs out of money. So technically, in capitalism, you always need inflation. And the way in which modern people try to inflate it is with deflation. If you see X amount of hoarding, you try to increase the supply. So that's where inflation comes from. Is people thinking, oh, that so much of this income is being taken out of the economy. Well, if this keeps happening, you already know what's going to happen. And that is, there won't be trade anymore. One person will get all the money from the bank, and the game of Monopoly will be over. But none of the people that are arguing for this ever grasp that one simple fact is, you need this thing to always be mined for multitudes of reasons. One's for its own security, so that people keep improving the system and keep up with it. So they keep trying to invest in better and better mining equipment, which basically keeps it encrypted. And two, it can never be used as a currency if it ends.
One Bitcoin
It'll just be hoarded.
£590 when I recorded this video, which is an increase of 494% mined on the 3rd of January 2009. So this is the birthday of Bitcoin. The Genesis block had a hidden message embedded into it by Satoshi. The 2009 sitting Chancellor in the UK, Alistair Darling, was forced to consider a second bailout for the banks as the lending drought worsened. That's the 37, or at least a very close version of it. So how does a blockchain work? First, we will look at just one block. One block consists of three things: two inputs, the data and the previous hash, and one output, the output hash. Let's look at each of those individually. The first input we will look at is the data. For Bitcoin, this is a from address, a to address, and the amount in question. This is a simplified version. In reality, one block's data will consist of a number of transactions ranging from as little as a few hundred to as many as a couple of thousand. So that's the data. The second input is the previous hash. However, we need to take a quick look at what a hash is before understanding this input. So what is a hash? For Bitcoin, this is an algorithm called SHA-256, the SHA standing for Secure Hash Algorithm. Picture it as a converting computer box. And whatever you put into this box, be it a letter, number, word, phrase, or an entire novel, the output will always be a 256-bit key, which equates to a hexadecimal, that's numbers and letters, string of 64 characters. So it will always be a 64-character hexadecimal output. This is the actual SHA-256 hash for the word anything, as that was my input. So that is the hash. So if we go back to the block, we can see the data and the previous block's hash are used as the inputs to create the block's output SHA-256 hash. This makes the output hash relevant to both the data within the block and the...
Okay, so if you think about this as in a traditional network, like your phone network, okay? So you have a person sends you whatever information from another phone, okay? However, the second he uploads that to the network, there is some level of a record of that, so that if this data gets lost, it just doesn't disappear from the system. So it keeps trying to make sure that it's gotten to you as the person that's text. However, that data is still then on that network. And so then you can get this data, and then if you wanted to, if you got a funny meme from your friend, you can then forward that on to another friend. And that whole thing is still on the network. Okay? So it's the easiest way to explain this is how your phone works.
The output hash of the previous block.
As a very simplified version.
I've tried to demonstrate this here with a chain of 3 blocks. Purely for simplicity, I have used only a 5-character hexadecimal sequence as opposed to the 64 we just talked about to represent both the output hash.
And so, your first meme, someone creates a meme, sends it to you. You send it to another person, they keep doing it. And then you have this whole meme develop online. And you can never get rid of that meme because it's everywhere online. Okay? That's basically what a blockchain is.
Hash and the previous hash.
If you want something that you might understand.
Block 1 has its 2 inputs, the data.
So then, if someone came in at one point and tried to make it so that the meme was disappeared, that it would be impossible because the meme is on too many people's phone, computer, or whatever. So you'll never be able to fully destroy that meme, is kind of the argument.
In the previous hash. This is hashed together, as we saw earlier, to create...
Or you basically have to hack into everyone's phone, completely remove whatever little meme might be there stored for all eternity, and that would be how you get rid of it.
Block's output hash. This is fed into the next block to become block 2's previous hash input. With this input ready, the data, all the transactions, are also fed in as the second input. The inputs are again hashed together to create our unique output hash, which is then fed into the next block to become block 3's previous hash input, and so the chain continues.
So basically, this meme goes to this person's phone, and he has his own password to this phone. It's sent to someone else who has a password on their phone. Sent to someone else who has a password on their phone. So basically, and it's so that then each one is protected as an incredibly simplified version of how to do this, okay?
As you can see though, the previous hash is the output hash of the previous block. So each block is direct.
So that meme's still there. It always looks like that. However, the network that it's in, you might have a different password to access that meme of whatever silly little picture your original friend sent you, as a way to very simply try to explain this to people that would probably understand that, oh, someone sent me a funny picture and they made it and they sent it to me, and then I keep forwarding it on, and then goes all around the internet, well then how to remove all of that meme from everyone? You'd have to like hack into everyone's basically computer or phone and completely remove it if it was saved there, type of a thing. And that's like how a blockchain would act.
Directly connected to the previous block and all of its data. Now we have a basic understanding of a block and how they are linked to each other in a chain. This means that it doesn't take forever to confirm new blocks, allowing transactions to go through in a fairly short period of time, but it also means that it is long enough to prevent any attacks on the system. Proof of work is essentially a complicated mathematical puzzle, one that I won't go into too much detail now. Let's just say that these puzzles are really difficult to solve and require computer power to solve them. This computing power is known as hash power. This hash power used to come from individuals all over the world with their home computers attached to the internet. However, nowadays, this has changed significantly with the opening of what most people would have heard of as mining farms.
Yeah, so imagine if Bitcoin was just these computers. Then one mining farm. If this is all, like if Bitcoin had all of its stuff and the whole network were these computers, then all today to completely hack in and steal everything from Bitcoin, you just probably need one of these farms and you'd be able to do it instantaneously, which is the problem with all of this.
Essentially, warehouses.
I mean, the reason why you have to have more and more complex thing is to basically drive technology into reinvestment, so that like basically like a hacker could just buy up enough of these things, or a group of hackers could just have enough to basically do this, and then they would have hacked into this original system. So once Bitcoin dries up, at some point this scenario will play out.
Is full of computer power devoted to solving these mathematical problems. So a question I can hear you ask is, surely with more computing power, the network would be able to solve these puzzles quicker, right? And therefore the blocks would be created in a shorter amount of time. Well, actually the answer to that is no, and this is why. The network is aware of how much computational power is available to it and adjusts the difficulty of this puzzle accordingly.
Yeah, so you're making a better safe. Okay, so the whole point of mining is to make it more complex, to be able to break into it as possible. However, the second Bitcoin is no longer mined, then for the most part, a lot of those mining things will be sent to some other cryptocurrency. And this is where you're going to start seeing huge things. If certain currencies became popular enough, then it would become more valuable if you have a giant farm to probably hack and steal Bitcoin than try to mine it. Because you could probably hack in the system and steal crazy levels at a certain point, if not enough people are doing it, which is kind of the flaw with this system.
Automatically, without any instruction from a master.
And at some point, it will just become really easily done, meaning the new stuff will just become so outdated that anyone can do it. However, if you have a big enough mining thing and Bitcoin just gets turned off, if you have like a giant facility mining it somewhere and a huge percentage of people are doing it, if enough regular people start mining some other currency, you could see then this single entity go in and be used as the opposite to break into the old system and just steal people's, to basically convert Bitcoin to being on their system and arguing it.
Master or central computer, as there isn't one. Remember, this is a decentralized system. As more computational power is added to the network, the difficulty of this puzzle increases, keeping the block creation time to that 10 minutes. There is such a market for these mining farms. So firstly, let's look at what a miner actually is. A miner, also known as a node, is essentially any computer on the planet that takes part in the solving of these puzzles.
Okay, so that's, yeah. Now, once again, if there's enough miners and they're making enough money and there's no rules and regulations, at some point, if they start mining some other currency and everyone else starts going more towards mining that, because Bitcoin's either drying up or whatever, you've now weakened your system. Okay? And so if you have X number of mines over here in Bitcoin, well, if enough get turned off, some single entity, it's not beyond reason, could literally use the same equipment that was supposed to protect it against it. But no one's realizing there's some some really interesting flaws to this. Now, given Bitcoin and how valuable it is, there's too many miners mining it for this to really be a scenario. Okay? But you just have to have a cryptocurrency either become more popular than Bitcoin, in which everyone starts trying to mine that way more than ever trying to mine Bitcoin, or you just have to stop Bitcoin from being mined anymore. Meaning, when it eventually runs out, this will be a probably something that happens within the first decade easily, if not sooner. That Bitcoin will just become just so unstable. So, good luck with your digital gold. However, this person has done a pretty intense argument of trying to explain this. And his name is Crypto James, basically. Right there is the original video. So anyways, God bless, have fun, take care.